I found a game for buddies.
Hatsune Miku, Colorful Stage.
Wow, it's been a while since I last talked about Hatsune Miku. What the heck's happened since then in terms of video games? Well, there hasn't been a new Project Diva game yet, that's for sure. But they did add Bring It On to Megamix, so that's pretty cool. Then they didn't do any more DLC. That's a little less cool. But you know what did finally come out? Project Sekai. I remember when that was just about to come out in Japan, or around the time I did the Project Diva F video. Man, that one takes me back. And I guess it took them a full year to get to a worldwide release, because it only just came out here a few months ago. And here I was worried this video wouldn't be topical. So since I'm bloodbound to cover every Miku game, I'll talk about Sekai, but to keep this video from being 5 minutes long, let's take it a step further. There's a whole world of mobile Miku games, so let's take a look at those. Oh, and when I say mobile, I mean iOS and Android. Once I will myself into figuring out 3DS emulation, I'll talk about the actual handheld Miku games, but one step at a time here. First, we need a moment of silence for the games we can no longer play, either through ended online support or incompatibility on modern systems. First, there are the Miku Flick games, which were rhythm games released on iOS starting in 2012. Fun fact, since these are technically spin-offs of the Project Diva series, this means Miku Flick was the first time a Project Diva game was released internationally, beating out the PS3 version of Project Diva F by about a year. Cool stuff. Unfortunately, both games were delisted in 2017, not that I think they would have survived the great iOS 11 massacre anyways, so the only way to play these now is by having a device with it already installed, or stumbling your way through the weird iOS emulation scene. Music Girl Miku gets it a little easier, being a sort of simulation music player released on iOS and Android in 2012, followed by an English release in 2013. It was delisted in 2016, but it's still very much playable on Android via APK. Is it worth it? Maybe? I just know that name makes it hell to Google. Hatsune Miku Dreamy Vocal is probably the most well-known of these. If you haven't heard of it, it's probably because it was a Chinese exclusive game published by Tencent in 2018, but this was a full-blown rhythm game, complete with a robust song list and even gacha elements, so basically the logical middle ground between Project Diva and Project Sekai. The game never left China though, and while it was totally playable without knowing any Chinese, server shutdowns are a universal language, with the game going down in 2020. These games are gone, but not forgotten. But with that memorial out of the way, we can talk about the games that you can easily download right now. First is Miku Tap Wonder. It's a clicker game, so you probably know how this goes. You tap the screen to clear stages and get energy. You spend the energy to either upgrade the strength of your taps, or buy new characters to auto-tap over time. Once you hit the inevitable wall, you can roll back to the beginning, and based on how far you went, you get a special currency that'll net you permanent buffs to make your tapping game even stronger. The game's cute. I like all the costumes and accessories for Miku, the various other friends you unlock look cute, and it has a nice soundtrack, but at the end of the day, it's a clicker game. If you've played one, you've played them all, and while some of the special skills look to shake things up, it's not really enough to make this one stand out. It's inoffensive, except for the price to remove ads, sweet Jesus, but it's really hard to say anything more than that. Next up is Miku Tycoon. Here's one for all you Persona 5 fans out there. Quick and to the point, it's Tycoon, or President if you know it by that name. To break it down, the goal is to get rid of all the cards in your hand first. The first player can put down as many cards of the same value as they want, and then the next player in the rotation has to match the number of cards played with the cards of a higher value. For example, if someone plays 2 3s, the next player has to play 2 4s or above. If a player can't place any cards, they pass, and if the rotation makes it back to the last person to play a card, the next cycle begins with them in control. First person to get rid of all their cards becomes Grand Tycoon, which carries over into the next round, where the person who finishes last has to give up their 2 most powerful cards. However, if the Grand Tycoon doesn't finish first, they automatically lose. What does this have to do with Miku? Absolutely nothing. Miku-themed cards, Miku-themed stickers, and a nice song to accompany the game, but that's about it. Also, not really digging how the ads work. They automatically play after every match, which can be disabled by paying money, but what can't be disabled is the stamina system, which requires ads to replenish. Also, the ads work kinda funky on my iPad. I've gotten locked up on them a few times, but it works fine on my phone, so your mileage may vary on this one. It's a passable version of Tycoon, but I don't really feel strongly towards it. Up next is the Amiguri Duology, consisting of Amiguri Jump and Amiguri Train. Jump tasks you with tapping the screen at the right time to clear the closing platforms and make it as far as you can. That's it. It's as simple as it gets, with the only thing keeping you going being the unlockable characters, which are given randomly after spending coins, which you get either through playing the game an absurd amount, or if you have any respect for your time, watching ads. It's an incredibly bare-bones mobile game, fun in short bursts, but that's about it. Amiguri Train fares a bit better. Finally, a game for buddies. This game tasks you with swiping the screen to move across a track. Grab yarn to increase the train, and dodge blocks that reduce it in either a level mode or endless mode. There's a few gimmicks like reverse controls, falling blocks, and paint that blocks your view, but it's still ultimately a very simple game. I can see it being fun during a lunch break, and if you've ever wanted to play one of those games from the mobile ads without feeling like you fell for the advertising, you could probably do worse than this. Though speaking of ads, the ads in this game are pretty awful, since you have to watch one both to get coins and after every level, and that eats up a lot of time. Of course, the most noteworthy thing about these games are the amigurumi designs of Miku and her friends. They're incredibly cute, and there's various costumes for each of them, which makes grinding out the coins kinda worth it. I'm honestly surprised there hasn't been official merch of these yet, but regardless, at least these two games have a very strong visual identity. Moving away from the free-to-play games for a minute, we have Miku Logic Paint. Now, I'm actually going to cheat here a bit. This is Logic Paint S, which is the console version, just because I already own it, but the basic gist is the same. Also, this is the first Miku game to be released on Xbox and Windows. Congratulations, I guess. You guys will get a Diva game someday. Anyways, Logic Paint S is a nonogram puzzle game, perhaps better known as Picross, which either means nothing to you or it means everything to you. To briefly explain, the puzzle is split up in a grid with numbers in each column and row. The numbers show how many squares need to be filled in, with multiple numbers being separated by a gap of at least one square. The trick is to use logic to figure out which squares can be filled in while complying with the other rows and columns to create a pixel image. It's Minesweeper meets Sudoku, basically, and it's shockingly addicting. As far as the games talked about today, this is the best one so far, easily. Compared to other Picross games, though, it's the way the ranking system works. See, in other Picross games, there's a setting that automatically flags an incorrect square, so you know when you messed up, though that locks you out of a star. You can disable it in those games, but not here. You fill in a wrong square, the game flags it, and you're out of a star. It also messes with the length of the puzzles. Other games let you fill in whatever you want, so it's possible to fill out what you think is correct, and then work backwards to figure out where your mistakes are and find what works. Here though, since you know what's wrong the instant you mess up, and since there's no limit to how many errors you can make, you'd have to fight the urge to brute force the puzzles as opposed to actually solving them. I suppose it's good if you're here for the unlockable art, but, and I mean no disrespect to the artists here, there are ways to get good Miku art without stumbling through nonogram puzzles. It's a fine enough Picross game, and I feel confident recommending the mobile version if just for the $2 price point. But on consoles, it's a tougher sell, especially on Switch. For less money, there are better Picross games, and for the same price, there's stuff like Murder by Numbers, which has puzzles of a similar caliber in addition to everything else it has going for it. Logic Paint S has a nice presentation and good music, but you already know if you'll like it or not, so make a judgment from there. While I'm on the Switch, I want to mention Hatsune Miku connecting puzzle Tamakatori. I know this isn't a mobile game, but honestly, when am I going to get the chance to talk about this game? As the name implies, it's another puzzle game, where the goal is to clear the board by connecting eggs of the same color. The line can't pass through other eggs, and it can only be bent twice, so the trick is to clear them out in a way that gives you more room to work with. Like the other games, it's fine. I'd be hard-pressed to call the game bad, but it's so incredibly basic. The game adds keys and locks at a certain point, I think, but that doesn't really change the game that much. You can get berries to call in new birds based on Miku and friends, and I think these are pretty cute, but it's not enough to carry the game. There's 200 levels with art unlocked along the way, but I got my fill after about 10. It feels like a minigame that would have been included as an extra in a proper Miku game, rather than a standalone release. And I realize you can say the same thing about the Amiguri games too. In fact, there's kind of an overlap from the simplistic gameplay and the focus on collecting various cute redesigns of these characters. The difference is, the Amiguri games do their place. that being small-scale mobile apps, which is a market they fit nicely into. Tamagotchi is, at the time of this recording, only on the Switch, and it costs $14. And I'm sorry if this comes off as a bit harsh, but in a market where I can get a more realized game like Pedal Crash for a fraction of the price, it needs a bit more than a Miku coat of paint to make it worth getting. Again, it's not a bad game, but I can only really recommend it if you want to complete your Miku collection. Hey, I got a quick 2 for editing note here, because it turns out a lot of things can happen in the span of 1 week. First, Connecting Puzzle Tamagotchi is going to be getting DLC around the time this video goes up. I think that's cool if you enjoy the game already, but it won't have any sweeping gameplay changes, so it doesn't ultimately change what I think of the base game. Not that it having massive gameplay changes locked behind DLC would be that good anyways. Second, and this is the big one, I'm obviously going to be talking about Project Sekai next. I can't have a Miku mobile game video without it, but as I was editing this, Patet Sekai 6 came out and did whatever the hell that was. I don't want to dwell too much on it because I feel discussions about stuff like this are better reserved both for people smarter than me and actual marginalized creators, so it's not really my place to discuss about it. But it would leave a bad taste in my mouth if I didn't at least mention that I'm aware that this happened and that I don't approve of it. This doesn't necessarily impact the things that I'm about to say that I recorded prior, because this mostly pertains to how the game was marketed, not necessarily the content itself. But I do think it's something people should be aware of going forward. Are we clear? We're clear. Anyways, on to the rest of the video. Finally, that brings us to Project Sekai, the big mobile game. Okay, it's technically just called Colorful Stage here in the West, but I'm still calling it Project Sekai, partly because I'm stubborn, and also just because it helps me appreciate the irony of them dropping the Sekai part of the title for the worldwide release. Anyways, we have an actual rhythm game this time, and it'll look pretty familiar to anyone who's played a mobile rhythm game before. Taps, holds, swipes that don't feel like they register nearly enough, missing a full combo by one note, I swear this isn't a elaborate gag, it's all here. There's a healthy song list available. Obviously, we have the usual suspects from some of the Diva games, like World Is Mine and Miracle Paint, as well as some of the more recent relative songs, like Kibana and Roki, because I think if you're a Japanese rhythm game, you're required by law to include Roki. But there's also a lot of songs we haven't really seen in the Diva games before. The English side of the Vocaloid scene finally gets some love, with stuff like Miku by Anamanaguchi and Echo by Crusher, which is really cool to see. Speaking of Echo, there are also songs that were originally sung by non-Krypton Vocaloids, like Churia Churia Da 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 and King. This isn't really a big deal if you've played any non-Project Diva rhythm games, but in this context, we haven't really seen this kind of crossover since Mirai DX, so it's great to see. And you know what that means, Sega. 1-2 Fan Club. You're a mobile rhythm game, fulfill the prophecy. Beyond that, there's a bunch of original songs as well. There's a number of traditional Vocaloid songs. I still maintain that Wah Wah World is a great song, and there's a bunch of brand new songs sung by the new characters from this game. It's a very strong song list, with more being added over time, so as someone who spends a lot of time in the Vocaloid category in rhythm games, I'm satisfied. It's a shame I'm not really satisfied with the gameplay though. Yeah, fake rhythm game fan, but I've never really been big on these kinds of mobile rhythm games. This isn't some crusade against mobile games, I'm perfectly fine with them, except for these download sizes. But I just have a hard time seriously getting into them. It's two things. One, the difficulty is in that weird area where, for me personally, hard isn't quite hard enough, but extreme is too hard. And the way some of these charts are set up are just a bit too much for my monkey brain. Secondly, and this is probably the bigger reason, good scores are dependent on luck. You can get a full combo easy enough, but to get the higher letter ranks, you need to have the right characters in your setup. And how do you get more characters? You roll the gacha, and maybe I haven't been playing enough, but the game seems to be really stingy with handing out free crystals, and these 10 pulls don't come cheap. And then there's the obvious gacha caveat where 4-star characters are inherently better than the relative, far more common 3 stars. So if you want to push for the higher ranks, you have to keep pulling for 4 stars, and then you gotta train them up, and this is on top of you already being good at the game. The game's more than playable without good characters, make no mistake. But it's the principle of the thing, you know? I'm playing out of my mind to get a full chain, and then I just keep barely missing out on a B rank, and that just stings. This is far from a Project Sekai exclusive problem. This kind of setup is what's keeping me from really getting into games like Bang Dream and D4DJ. despite there being a lot that I like about them, but one game at a time here. Basically, if you've played any of those games, you know if you'll enjoy Sekai on a gameplay level. However, what keeps me coming back to this game is the story. There's no central plot, rather it follows the individual exploits of 6 different groups as they work through their own problems and achieve their ambitions. This isn't unique for these mobile games, but I really like the way it's handled here. A point of contention online is the lack of focus on Miku and her friends, and yes, I can see why people aren't down with that, but I think placing the focus on the new characters allows for a kind of special vibe you just couldn't get with Miku alone. The common thread between all these characters are their love for music, and it's ultimately a set of stories that focus on how music, especially music with a dedicated scene such as this, managed to bring like-minded people together over a common interest, people who we might not have met otherwise. You don't even have to be a producer to see a bit of yourself in any of these characters, and while you'll probably find one group that you'll ride or die with, Vivid Bat Squad fans rise up, all of them have this feeling, and I think having a theme like this attached to Vocaloid, a music scene with such a colorful history and passionate fanbase, makes Project Sekai a special kind of game, one that I can easily see people getting attached to, and one that has a unique identity separate to the Project Diva games. With that bit of analysis behind us, thus concludes this foray into the world of mobile Miku games. Obviously, this video will probably become outdated as time goes on, either because of new games or a lack of support for others, but hey, that's the risk you run. What have we learned here today? Well, I think Hi, thanks for watching. Not me realizing that if I had scheduled this out just a little bit further, I could have had this video come out for Miku Day. Oh well, you live and you learn. Anyways, this was one video that I had in the works for a while. I've had it on the back burner for a bit, because I wanted to talk about mobile Miku games, portable Miku games, and also the VR Miku games. Obviously, one thing at a time here, I'll get to the rest of those as time goes on. Anyways, time for the next video hint. It's already in the works, and I spent a lot of time getting this one together. The hint this time is 3-9. Bonus hint, it's not Zero Escape. Trust me, I have plans for those, and that's gonna take a while. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.